projects will say, if you want to contribute to our project, it's okay. But if you do, then you need to assign your copyright to us. Which is not to say that you can't take your freedom and release your own copies. But in practice, that's unwieldy. It's often nicer if you just contribute back to the project. They incorporate your changes, and then the project goes on, and you are listed as, acknowledged and thanked. In practice, it's better. Generally speaking, if I make small changes to somebody else's project, I always send them an email with a patch and say that I assign my copyright to you. It's your project. You've already put it under a free software project, and having two authors can be problematic. Like Linux, the Linux kernel has a zillion different authors. So, can the Linux kernel ever go from version 2 of the license, which is the version that is set, to version 3? It's not clear that it ever can, because how can you find all the estates, all of the stakeholders, and that's a little bit unwieldy. So a lot of projects have witnessed that and say, well, if you want to contribute to our project, you should assign your copyright to us. Or a lot of folks will send $1 to the Free Software Foundation and say, we'd like you to be the steward of this copyright, and they'll assign the copyright to the Free Software Foundation, figuring that whatever they do going forward is probably going to be the right thing. So yes, every author of a derivative work has a claim under copyright, and yes, that's also unwieldy, so people kind of try to avoid it sometimes. Juan?
Yeah, so I think it will be a very complicated case if, say, Intel contributed to the Linux kernel and they violated themselves, or if they do, then that is gonna be really complicated.
Yeah, well, so what would happen in practice, and that's only ever been found for like very small snippets of code, but if in practice somebody could demonstrate in court that an author did not have the right to contribute code to the Linux kernel people would write it out. And nobody who had received a copy of that had a legitimate copy, because that wasn't a legitimate contribution to the kernel. So the Linux people would write around it, and all the other copies that had been distributed, in good faith would be out there, but they would be illegitimate. So the people using them would sort of technically be, they shouldn't be using it. In practice, nobody's going to go after them, I think. Big commercial vendors maybe. But they'll just say, we got this in good faith, and then they would switch to some version that didn't have the issue. So it could happen. I mean, they talk about that, when people make contributions to a big project like Linux, making sure that you own what you contribute. It's a big deal. But at worst, they just write around it. They cut your code out, and then they just have somebody write it from code. Anything else? Well, those are my two favorite books. Of course, lots of you know I kind of keep some free software collected at Truman. The math department does, really, on the talc server. talc.truman.edu. Oh, you can't really see that. Keep a few things here. For one thing, we keep some Linux distributions so that there are local copies, which is kind of nice when you're going to do a big update. It's kind of like having Windows Update hosted locally, only for Linux. I think the one that's probably most complete is the Gen 2. I think the Debian is complete, though, at least for the i386 distribution. Not the Gen 2, the Ubuntu. The Gen 2 is a little bit, and then we keep a few other things. One thing that I've kept is the GNU Ada Translator program, which is the Ada program that the CS students use for Windows. There was a while where you couldn't get the GNU Ada Translator. You couldn't get GNAT. And we were still distributing it when technically the license says if you want to distribute it, you've got to be willing to give away source code. And so we were kind of giving it away to students and put it out on the image and doing all these things. And I always felt a little bit kind of weird about that, because, you know, I'm a big believer in following licenses. I mean, if people are going to give you software and it's not going to cost anything, the least you can do is follow the license. That's just not that much, you know. And so here we had this software, but then, you know, the company, it became nebulous. We weren't sure who, you know, what was going on. And so eventually, you know, all that stuff got cleared out, new versions came out and so on. And they came with source, of course, because they're free software. So I snagged the image and the software, and the source code, and that way I'm like, you know, next time, this is not going to be a problem. Next time, we're giving the code away, we're going to have the source code. If somebody asks for it or wants it or whatever, we're going to give it to them. And so I always keep versions of GNAT. I also keep ISO images for various Linux installers. I guess I don't know, I haven't checked, but to see if that's still current. I used to compile my own kernel more often than I do these days, and I know a fair number of students do. So I kept Linux kernel source here, and I keep a copy of the free CD, which is a CD that the club, well, mostly me, but we sort of put together. We gave these away one year. We just booked the table out in Violet Hall in the area there, and it has a bunch of, it used to be little mini CDs, but all the applications have grown and they don't fit anymore. So it's a regular CD these days. And there's just a bunch of different free software programs that you might be able to use to entice Windows into the cult of free software. Things that are free, like OpenOffice, Firefox, some sound players, Pigeons, sort of preferred instant messaging platform, things like that. So I keep a copy of it here, but I also keep a copy of the ISO image somewhere. There's a set of links and so on. Yeah, so if you're totally interested in free software now, and jazzed about the idea that you need a place to get started, this is kind of a collection of Windows stuff. And not everybody's ready to dive into Linux the day they hear about free software, but might be willing to try some. You know, some of the applications are better than others. 7-Zip is, you know, an excellent archiving program, and Firefox is a terrific web browser. You know, Audacity is, I don't know if it's a good or bad sound program. It's always been good enough. And did you get your problem figured out?
I need to meet a friend now.
Oh,
That's
okay.
6. I'm sorry.
Sorry. And yeah, so always been functional enough, but I don't know. You know, some are more polished than others. You got any questions? You knew what free software was before.
I did.
So I definitely recommend the books, though. Richard Stallman's book is great. I have signed copies somewhere. And Lawrence Less's book. I think somebody borrowed it. Maybe Mike Solomon. I have to ask him. That's what was on my shelf. So, pretty funny. Well, in the announcement I said socializing in the fall. So
Okay.
I think
Thank
we're
you
in that
first.
spot.